Hello everybody, this is the Fin. We're going to be doing a little bit of quiet stream today. I'm not gonna lie, I'm actually just really stupidly tired. Oh, then again, when have I never been tired before? Although this time my excuse is I've been outside pretty much the entire day. So, do excuse me if I sound a bit more tired than usual. I mean, I'm always tired anyway. That's the secret. Hehehehe. Yeah, because I'm tired today. Actually, I planned to go, but that never happened. Also, I kinda have to repeat myself a couple of times. A little bit, because, okay, apparently today is not a good time to be streaming either, because apparently my OBS is still disconnecting quite often for whatever reason. I'm not sure why. It's getting a bit annoying, not gonna lie. It's been happening quite often. I would say it happens every single day now, and it's really annoying, and I'm not sure why. I may actually have to check my router for whoever is stealing the internet a bit too much. But well, whatever. That's for later. We should probably get this started because I'm not sure if I'll be able to stream for very long before I faint or whatever reason. Alright. I'm going to be reading again today. Right, again? Why? Okay, you know what? Maybe I should actually check my router. Yep, I am checking my router. I want to see what is actually going on with my internet. Unfortunately, I can't remember my password. Damn it. If I can't remember my password, then I can't do anything. Not today at the very least. So I'm just gonna have to deal with that for now. Hopefully it doesn't... Hopefully my OBS doesn't crack itself up a bit too much. Alright. Let's get started there. The Time Traveler. Chapter 3. The Time Traveler returns. Let's see. If we remember the last time we read this, we stopped at a moment when the time traveler showed a model of his machine to a group of people, which included a philosopher, a butcher, a town's mayor, and a bunch of other people that I don't actually know. Also, there's a doctor and a guy named Philby. For some reason, Philby is the only named guy around here. And after showing the time machine model, supposedly as a prototype, he demonstrated it. And supposedly it worked. Okay, that's actually really frustrating. I don't know why. Why? I don't know why. Please, why? I don't know why my internet is dying way too often. If I remember the password, I can deal with this myself. If I remember the password, I can deal with this with myself. I'm pretty sure it's nothing to do with anybody around in this house, though. Well, whatever the case, hopefully. Actually, I should probably check if I'm actually streaming. Yeah, I'm streaming. Okay, so the last time we stopped, the time machine brought out a prototype of his time machine. It's like some sort of small device that's small enough to fit on top of a table. So he also called a group of people and he told them that he made a time machine. And he made one of his group of guests to try out his model time machine. He tried out his prototype time machine, and apparently it worked. The model time machine, when it was toyed with, it kind of just disappeared out of sight. And nobody could explain where it went or how it disappeared. And the only conclusion that it could have is that it's an actual time machine. And it probably didn't go to the past because any one of them would have noticed that it was there. So the only conclusion is that the model time machine might have actually went to the future. But nobody really knows. So after that, a time traveler brought his group of people to look at his actual fully finished time machine that he's hidden somewhere inside his lab, somewhere inside his house. And that is where we stopped, and now we're going to resume the story with chapter 3, The Time Traveler Returns. Alright, let me drink a little bit. Alright, let's start. Chapter 3, The Time Traveler Returns. I think that at that time, none of us quite believed in the time machine. The fact is, the time traveler was one of those men who are too clever to be believed. You never felt that you saw all around him. You always suspected some subtle reserve, some ingenuity and ambush behind his lucid frankness. Had Philby shown the model and explained the matter in the time traveler's words, we should have shown him far less skepticism, for we should have perceived his motives. A pork butcher could understand Philby, but the time traveler had more than a touch of whim among his elements, and we distrusted him. Things that would have made the fame of a less clever man seem tricks in his hands. It is a mistake to do things too easily. The serious people who took him seriously never felt quite sure of his deportment. They were somehow aware that trusting their reputations for judgment with him was like furnishing a nursery with eggshell china. So I don't think any of us said very much about time traveling in the interval between that Thursday and the next, though its odd potentialities ran no doubt in most of our minds. Its plausibility, that is, its practical incredibleness, the curious possibilities of anachronism and of utter confusion is suggested. Okay, so apparently an entire week have already passed since he showed his time machine. For my own part, I was particularly preoccupied with the trick of the model. That I remember discussing with the medical man, whom I met on Friday at the Linen. I actually don't know how to pronounce that. It probably has some Linen, probably. He said that he had seen a similar thing at some other place, Chimigan, and laid considerable stress on the blowing out of the candle. but how the trick was done he could not explain. The next Thursday, I went again to Richmond. I suppose I was one of the time traveler's most constant guests, and arriving late, found 4 or 5 men already assembled in his drawing room. The medical man was standing before the fire with a sheet of paper in one hand and his watch in the other. I looked around for the time traveler and... "It's 7:30 now," said the medical man. "I suppose we'd better have dinner?" "Where?" said I, naming our host. "You've just come?" "It's rather odd. He's unavoidably detained. He asked me in this note to lead off of dinner at 7 if he's not back. Says he'll explain when he comes." "It seems a pity to let the dinner spoil," said the editor of a well-known daily paper, and thereupon the doctor rang the bell. The psychologist was the only person besides the doctor and myself who had attended the previous dinner. The other men were blank, the editor aforementioned, a certain journalist, and another, a quiet, shy man with a beard, whom I didn't know and who, as far as my observation went, never opened his mouth all the evening. There was some speculation at the dinner table about the time traveler's absence, and I suggested time traveling in a half-jocular spirit. The editor wanted that explained it to him, and the psychologist volunteered again. Beep boop. OBS Studio reconnection successful. Alright. The editor wanted that explained it to him, and the psychologist volunteered a wooden account of the ingenious paradox and trick we had witnessed that day week. He was in the midst of his exposition when the door from the corridor opened slowly and without noise. I was facing the door and saw it first. "Hello," I said. "At last." And the door opened wider and the time traveler stood before us. I gave a cry of surprise. "Good heavens, man! What's the matter?" cried the medical man who saw him next, and the whole tableful turned towards the door. He was in an amazing plight. His coat was dusty and dirty, and smeared with green down the sleeves, his hair disordered, and as it seemed to me, grayer, either with dust and dirt, or because its color had actually faded. His face was ghastly pale. His chin had a brown cut on it, a cut half healed. His expression was haggard and drawn as by intense suffering. For a moment he hesitated in the doorway as if he had been dazzled by the light. Then he came into the room. He walked with just such a limp as I have seen in footsore tramps. We stared at him in silence, expecting him to speak. He said not a word, but came painfully to the table and made a motion towards the wine. The editor filled a glass of champagne and pushed it towards him. He drained it, and it seemed to do him good, for he looked around the table and the ghost of his old smile flickered across his face. "What on earth have you been up to, man?" said the doctor. The time traveler did not seem to hear. "Don't let me disturb you," he said, with a certain faltering articulation. I'm all right." He stopped, held out his glass for more, and took it off at a draught. "That's good," he said. His eyes grew brighter, and a faint color came into his cheeks. His glance flickered over our faces with a certain dull approval, and then went round the warm and comfortable room. Then he spoke again, still as it were feeling his way among his words. "I'm going to wash and dress, and then I'll come down and explain things. Save me some of that mutton. I'm starving for a bit. He looked her across at the editor, who was a rare visitor, and hoped he was all right. The editor began a question. Tell you presently, said the time traveler. I'm funny. I'll be all right in a minute. He put down his glass and walked towards the staircase door. Again, I remarked his lameness and the soft padding sound of his footfall, and standing up in my place, I saw his feet as he went out. He had nothing on them but a pair of tattered, blood-stained socks. Ugh. Then the door closed upon him. I had a... Okay, no, this isn't working out. I need to restart something. Gotta hit it. I hit it. I think I have to reread the entire... I think I have to reread the entire thing. The entire... at the very least, the entire paragraph. Okay. From the top. So, a week... I'm gonna do a little bit of summary first. A week after the time traveler showed his time machine, his newly built time machine, a week have passed, and he apparently invited the group of people, some of the group of people that he invited earlier, along with a bunch of other new people, which included an editor from some sort of a local newspaper, and somebody else, a bunch of other people. I don't actually remember who, but there's also an old shy man who never really spoke much. Now, he was supposed to meet his group at 7 in the evening, but he was late and everybody started dinner without him, as his message told him to do. But then he appeared, and this is where we will resume. The time traveler was in an amazing plight. His coat was dusty and dirty and smeared with green down the sleeves. His hair disordered, and it seemed to me grayer, either with dust and dirt or because its color had actually faded. His face was ghastly pale. His chin had a brown cut on it, a cut half healed. His expression was haggard and drawn, as by intense suffering. For a moment he hesitated in the doorway as if he had been dazzled by the light. Then he came into the room. He walked with just as such a limp as I have seen in footsore tramps. We stared at him in silence, expecting him to speak. He said not a word, but came painfully to the table and made a motion towards the wine. The editor filled a glass of champagne and pushed it towards him. He drained it, and it seemed to do him some good, for he looked around the table and the ghost of his old smile flickered across his face. What on earth have you been up to, man? Said the doctor. The time traveler did not seem to hear. Don't let me disturb you, he said with a certain faltering articulation. I'm all right. He stopped, held out his glass for more, and took it off at a draught. That's good, he said. His eyes grew brighter, and a faint color came into his cheeks. His glance flickered over our faces with a certain dull approval, and then went around the warm and comfortable room. Then he spoke again, still, as it were, feeling his way among his words. I'm going to wash and dress, and then I'll come down and explain things. Save me some of that mutton. I'm starving for a bit of meat. He looked across at the editor, who was a rare visitor, and hoped he was all right. The editor began a question. tell you presently, said the time traveler. I'm funny. Be alright in a minute. He put down his glass and walked towards the staircase door. Again, I remarked his lameness and the soft padding sound of his footfall, and standing up in my place, I saw his feet as he went out. He had nothing on them but a pair of tattered, blood-stained socks. Then the door closed upon him, and I had half a mind to follow, till I remembered how he detested any fuss about himself. For a minute, perhaps my mind was wool gathering. Then, remarkable behavior of an eminent scientist, I heard the editor say, thinking, after his wont, in headlines. And this brought my attention back to the bright dinner table. "What's the game?" said the journalist. "Has he been doing the amateur cadger?" I don't follow. I met the eye of the psychologist and read my own interpretation in his face. I thought of the time traveler limping painfully upstairs. I don't think anyone else had noticed his lameness. The first to recover completely from the surprise was the medical man, who rang the bell. The time traveler hated to have servants waiting at dinner for a hot plate. At that, the editor turned to his knife and fork with a grunt, and the silent man followed suit. The dinner was resumed. Conversation was exclamatory for a little while, with gaps of wonderment, and then the editor got fervent in his curiosity. Does our friend eke out his modest income with a crossing? Or has he his Nebuchadnezzar phases? He inquired. I feel sure it's this business of the time machine, I said, and took out the psychologist's account of our previous meeting. The new guests were frankly incredulous. The editor raised objections. What was this time traveling? A man couldn't cover himself with dust by rolling in a paradox, could he? And then as the idea came home to him, he resorted to caricature. Hadn't they any clues brush in the future? The journalist, too, would not believe at any price, and joined the editor in the easy work of heaping ridicule on the whole thing. They were both the new kind of journalists, very joyous, irreverent young men. Our special correspondent to the day after tomorrow reports, the journalist was saying, or rather shouting, when the time traveler came back. He was dressed in ordinary evening clothes, and nothing save his haggard look remained of the change that had startled me. I say, said the editor hilariously, these chaps here say you have been time traveling into the middle of next week. Tell us all about little Roseberry, will you? What will you take for the lot? The time traveler came to the place reserved for him without a word. He smiled quietly in his old way. Where's my mutton? He said. What a treat it is to stick a fork into meat again. Story, cried the editor. Story be damned, said the time traveler. I want something to eat. I won't say a word until I get some pet pone into my arteries. Thanks. And the salt. One word, said I. Have you been time traveling? Yes, said the time traveler with his mouth full and nodding his head. I'd give a shilling a line for a verb. I'd give a shilling a line for a verbatim note, said the editor. The time traveler pushed his glass towards the silent man and rang it with his fingernail, at which the silent man, who had been staring at his face, started convulsively and poured him wine, and the rest of the dinner was uncomfortable. For my own part, sudden questions kept on rising to my lips, and I dare say it was the same with the others. The journalists tried to relieve the tension by telling anecdotes of Harry Potter. The time traveler devoted his attention to his dinner and displayed the appetite of a tramp. The medical man smoked a cigarette and watched the time traveler through his eyelashes. The silent man seemed even more clumsy than usual and drank champagne with regularity and determination out of sheer nervousness. At last, the time traveler pushed his plate away and looked around us. "I suppose I must apologize," he said. "I was simply starving. I've had a most amazing time." He reached out his hand for a cigar and cut the end. "But come into the smoking room. It's too long a story to tell over greasy plates." And ringing the bell and passing, he led the way into the adjoining room. "You haven't told blank and dash and chose about the machine?" he said to me, leaning back in his easy chair and naming the 3 new guests. "But the thing's a mere paradox," said the editor. "I can't argue tonight. I don't mind telling you the story, but I can't argue. I will," he went on, "to tell you the story of what has happened to me, if you like, but you must refrain from interruptions. I want to tell it badly. Most of it will sound like lying. So be it. It's true. Every word of it, all the same. I was in my laboratory at 4 o'clock, and since then, I have lived 8 days. Such days as no human being ever lived before. I'm nearly worn out, but I shan't sleep till I've told this thing over to you. Then I shall go to bed, but no interruptions. Is it agreed?" "Agreed," said the editor, and the rest of us echoed agreed. And with that, the time traveler began his story as I have set it forth. He sat back in his chair at first and spoke like a weary man. Afterwards, he got more animated. In writing it down, I feel with only too much keenness the inadequacy of pen and ink. He should have gotten a keyboard and mouse. And above all, my own inadequacy to express its quality. You read, I will suppose, attentively enough, but you cannot see the speaker's white, sincere face in the bright circle of the little lamp, nor hear the intonation of his voice. You cannot know how his expression followed the turns of his story. Most of us hearers were in shadow, for the candles in the smoking room had not been lighted, and only the face of the journalist and the legs of the silent man from the knees downward were illuminated. At first we glanced now and again at each other. After a time we ceased to do that, and looked only at the time traveler's face. And the summary for chapter 3 is, the time traveler returned somehow after a week, and he was in a state of incredible haggardness and really disheveled. Nobody really knew what happened to him. He looked like he was homeless. He looked like he was lost in a forest for probably even hours. And he came home like that. And everybody, his guests, were obviously surprised because, the time traveler was the one who invited everybody. He was the one who invited everyone. And nobody really knew what happened to him. So, yeah, he came home like that. And a couple of them, the guests who were previously in a meeting with a time traveler the week before, they thought it was time traveling. And then the journalist and the editor, the two other guests a week later that got invited, of course, those two didn't believe him. And apparently, the time traveler had actually been time traveling, supposedly. And now he is recounting his time traveling story and where he had been to this entire week. That's pretty much a summary of chapter 3. But the details are for next time. Yeah, that's what I'm guessing at least. And I'm guessing that chapter 4 and after that, chapter 4 and beyond will be the time traveler's entire story. From the week before until the week after that. Interesting. I think I find it interesting that this entire book is actually written in a format of a journal of some sort. Yeah, it's written like a journal, and the reader is also, quote unquote, the writer. And now we are supposedly reading our own journal. And I suppose it's kind of relieving to know that the time traveler did return back to his time safely. Kind of safely. But he did return, so that's a good little spoiler, I guess, to remember. Okay, that's good. Okay, that should be it for today. I think I'm going to end the stream now. We're going to continue the book next time whenever I feel like it, because I definitely don't feel like reading for, or rather streaming for very long. That's pretty much why I did this reading stream, so I don't have to stream for very long. Okay, next time, chapter 4 is when the real time traveling story will start. Whether he is actually lying or not is our own decision to make. But he might be telling the truth that he did time travel across time this entire week. But he could be lying. That's up to the reader, but supposedly, according to the writer of this book, the time traveler was being very sincere. Yeah. We'll see what his story is next time on chapter 4. Next time we stream is going to be chapter 4, yeah. But for now, I think I'm going to go to sleep. Although I kind of really don't want to go to sleep early, but I think I probably have to. So we're gonna end the stream now. Thanks for watching. I am really sorry about the scuff today. I honestly really don't know why it is that OBS seemed to really randomly drop its connection every 5 minutes or so, and break the flow of the stream. I really don't know why, but every time I restart my browser, it seemed to fix itself. Actually, it's not every time, most of the time, but sometimes it still didn't really work either. Maybe I should change service provider or something. I don't know. Anyway, if you still enjoyed it though, thank you so much for listening into my story time. Like I said, I really want to get back into reading books again, so yeah, this is a good practice for me to get back into reading. And thanks for watching. Thanks for listening along, reading along with me. Also leave a like if you actually like hearing it, although you probably don't need to, because you know, a lot of the stuff that happened, it's really annoying, and I'm really sorry about that. But if you wanna listen to more of me reading stories or do some other things on my channel, subscribe. Yeah, subscribe to my channel, and then you can see more stuff. Not gonna ask you to turn on notification, because really the subscription is supposed to do what the notification is doing. Well, whatever. Thanks for watching again. I'll see you next time, okay? Next time is probably going to be Cyberpunk, though. Although I think I should probably play Fallout a little bit. Nah, I wanna play Cyberpunk. Yeah, I can't even open my eyes now. Ugh. Yeah, next stream is going to be Cyberpunk. Not tomorrow. Maybe the day after is going to be another stream. But in any case, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time, okay? Bye-bye. God, I'm so tired.